Hi guys and welcome to my review of the Samsung Galaxy S6 and S6 Edge. Just a fair warning, this review will be very detailed, very in-depth and therefore very long. So if you want to skip maybe a part, there are always the time codes in the description available. I will change the pace of the review a little bit because this time I have bullet points. This means I have my notes. I will read them out loud and then talk about it. This makes one thing sure, I won't forget anything and I will get into anything that I feel is necessary to talk about. So let's not just waste any more time and check the design. Here we have the S6 and the S6 Edge. Just a quick look at both of them before I'm actually going to talk about them. As you can see here, glass on glass. They look very, very elegant. I really can't say anything bad. You either love the design or not. I personally like it a lot. It feels very great, as you can see here. So if one or the other is more attractive to you, that's personally up to you, but they've done a really great job. So I want to start off with my bullet points now. So this could get a bit odd, I never did it before, but I wanted to try it because, yeah, I always want to try out new things. So first bullet point, if we are starting with the design right now. Power button is placed just right. Every time I pick up the device, this is exactly where my thumb is. So there is nothing to improve here. It sits perfectly, absolutely nice. As you can see here, absolutely great. The next thing, volume buttons are too high. Many accidental hits in landscape mode, especially while playing games. As you can see here, I can easily accept this, but this one needs quite an awkward movement. And so this is just not the best thing, but if you're playing games, I noticed a lot of times I hit the volume down button. This is a little bit of an issue, but once you get maybe in the middle or maybe if you play like this, things are okay. That's not the biggest issue. Next bullet point, accidental taps on back button while watching videos. This is something I noticed a lot of times when I watched a video and held my device like I usually held like this. I did get a little bit too much into it, pressed the back button and yeah, got out of my video. Not the biggest issue, you get used to it, but I just wanted to mention it. Next thing, home button is personal preference, could sound less cheap though. As you can see here, the home button, some people just don't like any capacitive buttons or so they want the software buttons, but it is there. The good thing is you have a really great working fingerprint sensor, so that one works really nice. But like I said, it could sound a little bit less cheap. Otherwise the buttons, nice, clicky and tactile feedback, all of them. Even though I actually think the power button sounds a little bit less cheap than the volume buttons, but everything is still okay. What else? Next point. Tiny chamfered edge is smart, less dense over time. And this is something I really like a lot because we have a tiny little chamfered edge, as you can see here. And the great thing is, it is big enough so it makes a nice reflection, so it looks great. But it is so tiny, as you can see here, that you most probably won't ever dent it. Because on the Note 4 I had the issue there where I had a way bigger chamfered edge, like maybe on the 1M8, and then you noticed a lot of dents. But this one seems very, very safe and I have nothing discovered yet because the Note 4 got it dented up pretty early. Next thing, it is almost too light and slightly top heavy. So I'm not really sure about the exact size anymore. I didn't check it because I don't care, because the feel in hand is what I think. And I think it is a little bit top heavy in use, but therefore since it's so compact, it still feels very great. The cut-off sides provide very secure grip. And this is something they've done really, really well here. As you can see here, we have this cut-off, and this means you have a parallel sides and you can easily grip into it, and since it is no curve, you have something to hold on. It was really secure to hold on and really nice. The next thing, nice rounded curved glass feels great. What I mean by this is you have an ever so slight curve here, similar as on the Note 4 but not as dominant, but this one is very smooth, and if you slide from the side, even though if you don't have the edge, it just feels smooth and it feels just nice. Nothing to really say otherwise. Next thing, glass on glass, sorry, works great, maybe not for everyone. Personally, I like glass on glass. Glass on the front, glass on the back. It is very grippy and secure most of the time. Sometimes with grease it can get slippery, but I personally like it a lot. One thing I also have to say, we have Gorilla Glass 4 and I definitely notice a difference in terms of smoothness and quality in comparison to Gorilla Glass 3. Gorilla Glass just didn't feel as smooth, and also the oleophobic coating works way better on 4, because as you can see here how easily it was to clean it off. And on my Z3, where I only have Gorilla Glass 3, I have smudges all over the place and I can almost never get them off. But here it was very easy and I really like this. The next thing, the headphone jack is at the bottom and that is top. I like it because usually I put my device like this in the pocket and then the headphone jack is at the top. Of course, that's a personal preference, but I personally prefer this one a lot. The next thing, LED is very useful. We have a multicolor LED here. I like it a lot because it works with Light Manager. You can adjust the colors if you want to. So this is something very great. Okay, now I want to get to design and the pros and cons of the Edge. What do I like and what don't I like so much? As you can see, we have way less metal here. This means if you hold it like this, you hold on to very little metal. And this makes it feel a lot thinner than in comparison almost thick feeling S6 regular one. But therefore it also feels a little bit wider because the S6, as you can see here, has this curve here. And you only mostly hold like this. And actually the device therefore feels narrower. This one, since it has a flat back, feels quite a bit wider and therefore a little bit harder to grip actually. Some people say the S6 is easier to grip. It is if you hold it like this. But if you hold it like this more like, it's a bit easy, it's a bit harder to reach and it feels just a bit wider. So I've covered the design. I think I said pretty much ends I want. So I have to say it feels amazing. It feels great. It feels very premium. It feels very solid. But of course, that's always a little bit of a personal preference. I like it a lot and I really can't say anything bad. So now I want to get to the display, which without any surprise is the highlight here. If we check it, 2560 by 1440. So not 2K, but actually the higher resolution. QHD. So what we can see here, once again, I said it a few times on my reviews already. If you see a reddish screen, this is more towards the yellow side. But I have to say in this regard, it does a great job. It is, yes, slightly on the yellow side, but it is okay. And something I wanted to mention first, and let me just quickly get my notes up. So the first thing about the resolution, it is a high resolution, yes, but it doesn't really feel any more sharp because maybe of the penta matrix compared to a 1080p. So it is sharper, but it is not a whole lot. Definitely still great. I don't want to complain here. That's not what I meant. So what I'm trying to search right now here, we have 4 different color profiles. We have adaptive display, AMOLED Cinema, AMOLED Photo, and AMOLED Basic. And what I personally think, the first 2 ones have a really nice white, which you won't see right now because there isn't too much white. I think AMOLED Photo and Basic just are too yellow. And let me quickly show you if we get back into the gallery. It's not that visible on the video and it actually looks more white now than it actually in reality does. If you check it with adaptive display. That's just my personal. So I like the first 2 ones. Of course, AMOLED Cinema and adaptive display are overblown, oversaturated and all this, but I think the mainstream user will prefer this. AMOLED Photo and Basic are definitely more realistic in colors, not as overblown, not as oversaturated. But I'm just not okay personally with the 2 white, with the 2 yellow white. So I'm just not a fan of blue white. So the next thing, sharpness is great. The white is totally okay. Usually I don't like it too yellow, and compared to the Z3 it looks a lot yellow, but in reality I was totally fine with the yellow, even though it is a little bit yellow. But for the mainstream market, great. The blacks, don't have to say anything. The best blacks, we have AMOLED, it's like a turned off screen. Contrast levels are amazing. Colors, like I said, they are overblown. They are a little bit oversaturated. But if you prefer something like this, personally, I like it a lot. The Super AMOLED display just looks absolutely stunning. The next thing gets quite obvious, rainbow effect. Yes, that's what I wanted to mention. We get on really hard angles, you get the from AMOLED known rainbow effect. Not really that much noticeable here on this video and really on extreme angles. But what I noticed in direct sunlight, if you have a really hard sunlight and high brightness, then you will have rainbow all over. And I had a hard time actually seeing the display because I only saw rainbows. One thing to quickly mention, because a few people like to complain about it if not mentioned, if you put on auto and if you are in a bright sunny environment, it will get even brighter. So the display itself was very bright, but the rainbow effect in direct sunlight was quite heavy. What I also just quickly wanted to mention, the sides are less responsive. So if you are like me, heavily rely on bezel gestures like I do, then you will have a little bit of a hard time, because I had to use at least 2% for my gestures, as you can see here. I had to use 2% instead of 1%. And I had a little bit of trouble getting some gestures getting activated as I would like to, but it still worked quite okay. Pros and cons of the Edge now. So, what are the pros and cons of the Edge? The first obvious thing is, as you can see here in the light, you always have this reflection from side angles. And if you hold it like this, a lot of times you will just have these odd little reflections on the side. Personally, I'm not the biggest fan. It is more of aesthetics in course of design. What else is there? If you have maybe, for example, a widescreen, let's just check it, Google. You will have some color shifting here on the sides. It is noticeable, it gets slightly blue or green, and it just looks a little bit, not that great anymore, because it is a color shift. Also, if you have text that goes completely to the side, it is on the curve, and typing due to the curve is also a little bit more awkward. So personally, in terms of the display usefulness, I think the Edge is a little bit of a drawback, so not really the biggest fan. So now I want to get to the sound and give you a demo right now real quick. Let's start off. Since we are going super detailed this time, let's just do one more. Yeah, I should stop it. Okay. One thing real quick. First, before I'm going to talk about the actual sound. If you're going to sound and notifications, you have sound quality and effects here. So you have adapt sound, which allows you to check your hearing with a headphone, adjust it, and it will adapt the sound to maybe frequencies as you don't hear so much. So it's like on hearing test when you are at the doctor. It will check where you are good at hearing and where you are not, and it will adapt the sound accordingly. What you also get is Sound Alive Plus and Tube Amp. If you have ever heard a tube amp, you will maybe know to appreciate it. It sounds quite nice, but the difference of both of these isn't really that big, because I wrote audio settings are quite limited, more options, maybe an equalizer would have been great. So that is what I still say. It is nice to have options, but I would have liked more if they are already there. So the next thing is the sound that I actually want to talk about. So the speaker placement maybe isn't the best for a few people, but on the bottom I'm totally fine with it. It gets hardly ever blocked, and let me quickly show you how it actually sounds blocked. So yeah, it can get blocked quite easily if you hold it like this, but it is quite easy to get used to it and not block it. And then I have to say, my bullet points are maximum volume is great, only the last step tends to distort. And what I mean by this, it is very loud, and I would say it almost on Nexus 6 level, which I said to be the loudest device I've heard so far, and this one is really loud, a lot louder than most of the other phones out there. But the last step on certain occasions tends to distort. Not the end of the world, just go one step lower. It is quite a little bit less loud then, but still more than loud enough. Next bullet point. Bass and mids, good for a phone, balanced fairly well. So there is bass, as you can maybe heard on the video a little bit. Of course, it's just a phone. The mids were really nicely balanced. The voices were now loud and clear. And I also said highs slightly muffled at times. Still great. So I noticed it's not that super clear and clean. It was a little bit less clear, but still totally fine. I really like the sound because very loud and still great. Next, I want to talk about the performance. So I wrote mostly fluid and smooth. What I mean by this, as you can see here, a Twitter app, this looks extremely smooth. And it is, because apps like this are super smooth. But then the next thing I wrote, very few apps stutter bad like Feedly Reader. And this is mostly, I think, lack of optimization of the app. Because as you can see here, this is still quite smooth. But what happens if we go into it? And that is quite hard to grasp for me. It will take a little bit to load. Because here the performance is actually really bad. And of course it doesn't load. So okay, Feedly Reader didn't work, but this app did stutter a lot. Otherwise, if smooth, it is super smooth. Only the Nexus 6 is maybe better. The Z3 is less smooth but feels lighter and softer because it has softer stutters. And this was noticeable on Google Plus, for example. As you can see here, whenever I release, there is quite a hard stutter at the end. And I've seen this a little bit better a few times. It is smooth, no problems here, but it does stutter a little bit harder than some other devices at the end, not the end of the world. Next bullet point. Multitasking seems ever so slightly delayed and longer animated, slightly aggressive with app killing behavior. Maybe you read already about that app killing behavior. I noticed for a device with 3 GB, it doesn't hold as many apps in the RAM as some others, because the OnePlus and the Z3 definitely are able to hold on more apps. It does really, so it does to really tend to kill apps a little bit earlier. But still, as you can see here, there is a little bit of it just feels a little bit slower. It is not as snappy the multitasking as on some other devices. Still totally fine though. If you don't need the absolute fastest, it is still great because it is therefore smooth all the time. The next thing, what I wrote, and let me quickly check that. See, usually this game should have still been in the RAM, but it isn't. So what I wrote is, yeah, and I accidentally killed it, sure. Okay, so yes, this review is getting long. So what I wrote down, some games run with higher frames than usually, but also drop lower. Rubber band feel still playable at all times. What I mean by this, especially in this game, it was noticeable a lot. Do we have the highest brightness? Yes. So if we start the game, it runs smooth, as you can see here, quite a lot. But if there's a little bit more action, it does to also go a little bit lower in terms of frames. As you can see here, it is super smooth. At least here on the video, it looks extremely great. But sometimes it gets a little bit low. But I would still say the performance for games is absolutely great. Especially, this is one of the games that was a little bit more noticeable. But if you go into Asphalt or Real Racing, all those work very nice, very smooth, and really no issues at all. The last thing I wanted to mention is actually two things. Once really warm, it starts to lag and stutter. Never happened in normal use, only on heavy stress. So I noticed when I installed like 5 or 6 themes in a row, it downloaded a lot, the device got hot. I don't mean hot, but really warm. And then I had some really hard, bad stutters and lags until the device cooled off for maybe like half an hour later. But this was just when I did this installing and heavy testing with gaming and so on. In usual instances, it never happened and was fine. Also, a few instances of short freeze, like 2 to 5 seconds of totally being unresponsive, only happened 4 times. So what happened on the first 2 days, I had like 4 freezes where the device felt like it was completely frozen and I had to restart it. But after 2 to 5 seconds, it was different all the time. It was responsive again. So I just wanted to mention it because it is not the biggest issue, because it was gone after all. So what I will do now, talk about the battery. And I will take a little bit more time for that. And therefore I will make a quick break now. Okay, the break is over. I had to do this because the video got too long not to split up the files. What I wanted to show you just real quick what I meant with Feedly Reader. As you can see here, this is what I meant. This doesn't look smooth. So this is definitely app optimization, because all the other apps run absolutely smooth. And also when we check the browser, let's go into the site. The browser is absolutely smooth and happy, even while rendering it's still okay. A little bit juggy because it has to render stuff, but once it's low, absolutely smooth. So just real quick, as for the performance in overall is great, mostly very smooth. Multitasking is only ever so slightly limited. Still great though. Gaming performance, also still great. It is one of the smoothest devices out there. It has a few instances where it isn't, but it is not, as maybe some other reviewers say, by far the best one out there. The Nexus, in general, the Nexus 6 is smoother, and also the One Plus. Maybe not really faster. This one felt slightly faster, but just not as snappy as maybe the Z3. But it is, I would say, still top 3. Don't worry about that. And I'm definitely not saying anything bad. The performance is great. But now for the battery life. And that is something I will take a lot time to talk about, because I think there is a lot to talk about. Battery on this device is the one crucial thing that they, in my opinion, messed up. So first of all, charging 30 minutes gets you to 55%, 1 hour gets you to 92%, and 1 hour 15 to 1 hour 20, and you are fully charged. Great value, of course, but there are two things in mind. The question, fast charge is great, but do you always carry the fast charger with you? Because usually it's always when you're out and about where the battery gets short. And do you always carry the one fast charger with you? That's the question. Otherwise, Qi charging, it is nice. Definitely not bad. So I want to take now a few, because I did some more analytical tests to test the battery, and then the next thing is talk about battery life in daily use. But the tests I did, and I will write them down as you will see as an overlay, but I did a few YouTube and video tests. So 1 hour of 1080p YouTube video, 60% brightness, took up 20%. 1 hour of 720p YouTube with 60% brightness, 90%. So pretty much the same, and this shows actually how efficient video is, playback. Next, 1 hour of YouTube with 30%, also 90%. 1 hour of YouTube with 25% brightness, also 19%. So no matter if you use 25% or 60% brightness, there's pretty much maybe 1% difference in terms of battery drain. So not really a lot. So this is where it's really efficient. 1 hour of 1080p with YouTube at 100% brightness though was 30%. So once you get to a very high display brightness, then you will notice more. So like I said, very efficient in video playback. The next test I did was gaming. 30 minutes of, for example, playing Riptide with 60% brightness, 16%. So like 32% an hour. So this is like using a video with 100%. This was 60% brightness, which I think is the limit you should use to have a nice experience in terms of the screen. The next test, 1 hour of music streaming over Bluetooth, 6%. And that was just playback and not actually streaming. I think this is a little bit too much. I've seen devices and I have devices with half of that. This could have been improved. Otherwise, very inconsistent and high standby drain, and that is without location and Twitter sync, only mail and Google. And this is what I wanted to show you, because I did quite a few screenshots to show you the battery life in normal use. As you can see here, I used 45% in 4 and 5 hours, 1 hour and 43, and this looks still good, but this was all on Wi-Fi. The next thing, 3 hours in 16 hours. Okay, it's an acceptable value, but still only on Wi-Fi. The next one, 72%, 2 hours and 22. Yeah, not mind-blowing, also on Wi-Fi. As you can see here, the drain here was YouTube system, so this is the thing. Also, the next. And here is also one, 10 hours, 3 hours of screen on time, also on Wi-Fi. So as you can maybe see, you can get about 3 hours over 10 to 12 hours, but the standby drain is what killed this device for me. Because now you can see here, close to 19 hours, not even 3 hours. And that was pretty much quite a soft use. The next day, 18 hours, 2 hours and 40 of screen off time, with a little bit of Bluetooth streaming. It says 4 hours here, but it was actually closer to 2 hours. So also not a really great result. And this is what I think, I have to say. 18 hours, 18% in 8 hours. Okay, we have a little bit of screen, but still. The standby drain just isn't good. 47 in 40. And this was, again, normal use. 2 hours and 30 over 95%, 20 hours. So as you can see here, it is just not great. 8% over 3 hours. So you have a standby drain of about 2 to 3%. And this is, like I said, without location and Twitter sync. The next one, 2 hours and 20 over the course of 17 hours. So as you can see here, just not that happy. as here once again, 9% in 4 hours. I think this is just a little bit too much, and I also want to show you the same on the Edge, which I used without a SIM card, and this is extremely hard to grasp. As you can see here, I got quite a good, but this was only video playback. But I want to show you one quite bad I just got recently. 29% in 15 hours. And this is with a device that was not used at all, without a SIM card and without any syncing. So in terms of battery life, and I think I gave you enough stats, it is not great. I would actually call it pretty bad. What I expect in my normal use, 2.5, closer to that, to maybe 3 hours. And like you always saw, not even on Wi-Fi, I managed to get really over 3 hours with 60% brightness. I saw people getting 4 and 5 hours with almost no brightness, maybe possible without any syncing, all fine. So I would say over the course of 12 hours, 10 to 12 hours of use, you can get 3.5. But for me, a full day of use is when I wake up until I go to bed, which is usually at about 18 to 20 hours. And then I don't see getting much more than almost 2 to 2.5 hours. So I would say the battery life is extremely disappointing, and actually for me, the deal breaker. Okay, let's get to the software, and as you can see, the review is getting super long. Okay, let's get to the software now, because I think I've told you enough. As you can already see, I'm using a theme. It is, I think, Iron Man or Avengers. I'm not really sure which one right now, but as you can see here, you have a themes engine, and the theme engine is nice, but I also have to say it is a little bit too limited. I would like to have a few more options, like just the icons or just the theme, but it is always just one thing. This can improve over time, though, not really the issue. The next bullet point, fingerprint scanner works fast and reliable. Yep, I can't really say anything bad. As you can see here, this works absolutely fine. If you don't have super greasy hands, because I noticed when I had oily hands it didn't work, or if you completely go wacko how you hold it, then maybe not, but usually it was totally fine. Next thing. The settings design is totally fine, don't see why people complain about it. As you can see here, this in my opinion looks nice, especially if you use a theme. Everything is sorted quite nicely, everything is where it should be. Okay, for someone who's new maybe to a Galaxy device, it could seem a bit overwhelming, but I think it is really nice. There are 6 quick settings adjustable here. You also get quick settings here, which are customizable. Of course, I would like to get rid of S-Finder and Quick Connect, but I'm totally happy with the settings. It is totally fine, and I don't see why people complain. Display profiles and audio settings are welcome. I talked already about that. So you have the display profiles and you have the audio settings. This is nice, but I would still wish a little bit more flexibility here. I would like to adjust the display profiles myself. The same goes for the audio, but still okay. The next point, not really much gimmicky stuff anymore. And yeah, and I have to say this is true, because if you go into the settings, there's just not really a lot. It is, I would even say this is close to what I like to call a themed stock Android. Not quite there yet, because you still have a lot of different stuff there, but I think they are going on a great way. The next point, multi-window and window mode work very well, could support more apps though. So what you have here is multi-window. You can select the apps here, for example, let's go to Amber, and then you can select, so you can use them both, you can adjust them. You also have this quick window where you slide up, and then you have this draggable multi-window. But as I said, not all the games, not all the apps work, so you have to live with that. But it is a great option still. You can use it if you want to, and if you don't want to, don't use it. I still say it is nice. The next thing, TouchWiz doesn't really seem to hinder the performance. Yeah, and this is absolutely true, because I used this device and I never really felt like the device got slow, buggy or anything. It was stable, and I say they did a great job with TouchWiz. The next thing, many apps can't be uninstalled, not the end of the world though. Yeah, there was a lot of talk about so many apps being there and only can be deactivated, but I don't think that's the end of the world, because on every other device this is the same thing. So don't really bother too much about that. And if you maybe saw here, I'm using Nova Launcher because I don't like personally so much a TouchWiz launcher, but totally fine. For the camera, I actually don't have any notes, but I have a few things to say. I did a few shots today because the weather was great. I checked them, and I'm saying it right now. This is the best flagship camera phone you can get. There are maybe phones that are more dedicated cameras that have better, maybe the Lumia 1020, I don't know. But on a flagship device with great performance that is recently released, this is the one to go for if you want the best camera experience. The iPhone, everyone says it is now on iPhone level. I highly doubt that. I never saw the iPhone in action, the new one, but I can't believe they've done a better job because pictures are extremely detailed, extremely sharp. Okay, they do boost the colors a little bit, and especially on the display, it is extremely obvious because let's quickly check, for example, a video I did. Let's quickly get rid of that. Okay, look at this video. This is just not real anymore. It is totally on the screen, extremely oversaturated. So this is not any material to life. And as you can maybe see, and I will make an overlay, I had one issue on videos for one reason, I don't know. I got a lot of artifacts on movements, so I'm not really sure about that. Maybe can they fix this? And I didn't have this all the time, but especially in the garden I had this. But still, pictures are great. Even low light, it got great results. Pictures just look amazingly detailed, super sharp. Focus is extremely fast. Shutter speeds extremely fast. So the best camera you can get. So if this device is more for the camera experience, then just go for it. Okay, that's it for the camera. Now I want to get to the recap. Design, very premium, awesome feel in hand, great size and easy in one-hand use. Nothing more to add here. Display, not the most accurate, but the most pleasant one on the market. Just a joy to look at. Like I said, very bright, very saturated, very poppy, and I really like to look at it. Sometimes if I go to something more accurate, I know to appreciate that as well, but if I'm out and about, I just want a display that looks nice. Maybe not accurate, but that's not the case. Sound loud, good placement, not great. Well balanced, but slightly muffled. Yeah, like I already said, for me the highlight is, it is important for me that the speaker is loud, and this one is really loud. The case that is a little bit muffled isn't an issue for me. Performance, flawless and super smooth in most cases, but some more hard stutters in very rare cases though. Doesn't say anything bad. Like I said, top 3, super smooth pretty much most of the time. Sometimes it gets a little bit micro stuttery, but not really hard laggy or so. So in normal daily use, it won't ever bother you, and still you will get a great experience no matter what. Battery, charges super fast, true. Doesn't hold very long though. Okay for mainstream users, but pretty much impossible to get through the day without recharging for power users. Like I said, 2.5, maybe 3 hours if the day is quite short. But for a power user, this won't make it through the day. You will have to charge at least once. So I am very disappointed in the battery life, but yeah, you can't change that. Software, totally fine. If I would have to choose stock Android, pure stock Android or TouchWiz, I think I'm almost at the point, if I had no other choice, I would go for TouchWiz because it works as reliable as stock now, but therefore it has a few enhancing features like multi-window, and you just have more options like a few gesture stuff and so on. And this is good because if you use a custom ROM, of course, then I would go more something stock like with custom ROM features. But if it's just stock and TouchWiz, it sounds very odd, but I would even go for TouchWiz because I don't have a personal issue with the look anymore because we have the themes now, and this is totally fine for me. And how it actually worked, the navigation and everything else was good enough. If you adjust with a few third-party apps, replace maybe the lock screen with AC display, replace maybe the launcher with Nova or Google Now launcher, and you should be totally fine. I don't think it's worth complaining anymore. Camera, yeah, like I said, this is the one camera to beat. Yes, I know the G4 is coming out, which should be even better, but I highly doubt it. Maybe the camera hardware itself is better than on the S6, but I think what they did here in terms of software processing afterwards, they've done an amazing job, and the camera is just amazing. So the next thing to talk about, edge or not to edge. I don't want to get too much into detail, but for me it is like this. If you want the nicer looking device, as you can see here, it looks a bit nicer, go for the edge. But I think it is not worth the sacrifice because the device feels wider, that is not the issue, but you have these odd reflections, you have this color shift here, and you don't really have any benefits. The few edgy features are gimmicks in my opinion, and therefore I also think this one is just more comfortable to hold over a normal use. It just feels more natural. But if you want something new and exciting, the edge is okay. Personally, I would definitely go for the regular one. So, one more question. Is it the best phone available? I would say this is an amazing, disappointing device. And what I mean by this, just stay with me. It is amazing because the display is great, the build quality is great, the camera is great, the performance is great. And when I say great, I mean extremely great. But the battery life is what I mean with disappointing. They screwed it up. They wanted the device to be too thin. If I would have easily, because if you check the Sony Xperia Z3 and if you put them both on the table, and I asked a few people, and it's not really that noticeable, which one is the thinner one? And everyone said the Z3, because you have this camera bump here on the back, which you don't have. So it will be lifted, and then it definitely looks thicker. And even if not, if you go from the thinnest side to the thinnest side, the Z3 is only 0.5 millimeter thicker, but therefore has 20% more battery life. And no, not battery life, battery capacity, because the battery life difference is actually way bigger. And I will make an in-depth comparison between those two for you to see how big it actually is. But I think they shouldn't have made the compromise with the battery. Of course, you have quick charge, and if you are okay with charging all the time, I'm not. I want to wake up, don't bother about the battery, and get to sleep and then charge it, or maybe even for another day. But I don't want to have to, when I use it for 10, 12 or 15 hours, always to check the battery, because I definitely had to manage my battery life, because I'm working at night, and at night this week when I did it, night shift, and when I'm at night I have more free time at work, and then I hear a lot of podcasts, and I couldn't afford to use this device. I had to use a second device just for the podcast, because otherwise this device wouldn't have made it through the day. I would have maybe gotten 10 hours, battery would be dead, because as I said, 6% an hour of Bluetooth drain. So the battery is the biggest letdown. If you don't care about the battery, you only want the best device and you have no problem with charging, this is the one to go for, because in so many reasons it is better than the best phones out there. And it is pretty much only the battery life where it's a lot worse than most of the others. Maybe not a lot, but still a lot worse. So this is definitely something you have to decide for. I will give you my personal opinion on my raw channel, on my personal channel, because I don't think that's really necessary to discuss here. I gave you all what I think I wanted, gave you all the details. If you have anything else you want to maybe know, if I didn't cover anything, because the video is about 40 minutes now, and I think I covered a lot, maybe I dragged things a bit too long. But definitely let me know if you... I didn't actually even take all the bullet points. I did read them all, but I didn't really follow through what I planned to. But that's the nice thing, if you have something new planned, you don't really have to follow it through. I think it was nice. I covered a lot. I think I was very detailed. I hope so. But it is for you up to decide. So if you like this video, give me a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel. You can always also support me on Patreon if you want to, but you don't really have to. The links will be up in the description below. I will also make a written review where I will post all the pics, all the samples, to get the uncompressed pics for you to see how the actual quality is. Otherwise, I have nothing more to add. Everything else is for you up in the comments. And one thing, please, if you want a reply from me, use the YouTube comment system and not Google+, because I see a lot of people using connected links and so on, and I can't reply on these, but I want to. So use the YouTube comments. Okay, until next time, bye. I'll be back.